The F5 Local Traffic Manager, this is going to be about iRules concepts. Now, we could say iRule because, well, you know, I mean, kind of do, but this is more about a you and I kind of thing. So we'll just call it intelligent rules. Bring some intelligence or the concepts thereof into our ADC, and how do we go about manipulating what's going to be happening. So iRules is a tickle-based scripting language that we have really to examine traffic as it comes into the system, and really can manipulate the flow of that data through the big IP or through my ADC system on here. Okay? So a lot of cool things that we can do, but basically it's a method of policy-based forwarding. So I'll kind of give you that for something to think about. So PBF. I'll just abbreviate forwarding here. You may think of like policy-based routing and some other vendors and stuff like that. This is the same type of idea, but we're moving the traffic based on a policy as opposed to basic rules or standard things that we have. So this should be viewed as the exceptions for whatever default methods that you have designed through the ADC already. Now, you know you have the methods and capabilities to manipulate the what, the when, and the how of our application delivery. So remember, everything is still all about the app. Okay? So, no worries. That could be kind of the song. It's all about the app, no worries. Yeah, we'll forget that. I'll keep that out of my repertoire for a while. But anyway, policy-based forwarding on here, the bottom line is that you have control over what's going to happen. You can actually go in at pretty much almost any point of the transaction, so as my data is going through here, what it's getting matched on and going out, in order to kind of parse variables, things like that, change things around. These could be very simple rules, they could be complicated ones. The bottom line is that you have the control of what's going to happen. Now, iRules can direct traffic to certain pools. They can go to specific pool members, or they can go to specific ports, or to specific URL paths. You can manipulate SNAT. You can do all sorts of different things to really affect how one client over here, so let me number these guys, how one client, number one, is going to differ from 2, 3, 4. Something special about it, something special about the way they're coming in. So cool stuff that we have to be able to manipulate this. Okay? So iRules generally have a very simple structure, but kind of like with any programming language, we can go from simple to complicated fairly fast in there. Basically, my 3 points that we have coming in are parts of an iRule anyway, are when an event occurs. Alright, so here's number 1. And then, if on a condition. So, number 2. And number 3 is then action. So basically it is going to be a combination of, well, I call it a when, if, then, rather than just an if, then, but I can have multiple if, then actions going on in there. Okay? So think of it from kind of the logic perspective of when, if, then, and that'll help you out a lot when you're designing what the iRules are or what they're going to do for you, or to think about what you want to happen when you kind of come up with a scenario for it. So iRules are event-driven by nature, so it's really just a matter of knowing event names and the meanings when transactions are taking place on an ADC. Now, that being said, let's come take a look at what we're going to have going on in here. Okay? So the first thing, so say number 1, host number 1 here is going to be sending stuff in. When we set up a connection, when we first establish a connection in there, what exactly are we doing? Well, that's right. The first thing that we have to do is TCP handshake. So that'd be my SYN, my SYNAC, my ACK, stuff like that in there. Okay? Now, when I do that, that is an event. So client accepted. Okay? So we see that going on as far as our first stage in there. The next thing we do, of course, is send whatever my application data happens to be in there. Right? That's going to give me my next step, which is client data. I'll go ahead and just lowercase some of this. You will see them all in caps in terms of representation on the ADC. So client underscore data, and at the same time we may have a next event, HTTP request. Okay. So those are events that are going to happen specifically on a web server. We may have other ones that we have going on based on that information in there. And within this, so really kind of the next stage that I'm going to have, so as this comes in, where does it come into? Right, it comes into my virtual server, so my virtual server is going to have its default rules, or in this case possibly an iRule that I have set up, but we're going to have the information going based on what's happening, and we should get to the next event, which would be LB selected. Alright, so this is based on load balancing, but it's going to be based on which pool member that I'm picking at that point in time and knowing what to forward. Now, after I do this stuff on here, I do kind of have an interruption. Okay, so my interruption is going to take place right in here, and that's where I'm going to have stuff go where the TCP session goes from the ADC to a server. Alright, so I've got the second part of my connection, if you will, going on. Again, TCP connection being the SYN, the SYNAC, the ACK, that kind of stuff in there. What I'll have at that point, and so I'll put number 4, is going to be server connected. So server connected, and I'll have server data, HTTP response, things along those lines going in there. But everything that I may be able to do, probably want to start looking at before this point right here as far as manipulating stuff, because once I hand it to a server, well, I mean, I guess I can still manipulate the data, but might not be accomplishing what I want. So we'll kind of start out with simple things in there, and really from an example standpoint, once we get into our next nugget on configuration, we'll probably look at the beginning portions for, you know, client accepted, client data kind of ideas before we get to even choose the load balancing part. That'll help us great for any redirects, that'll help us for any specific load balancing pool changes and things like that. As your skills grow with creating these tickle scripts, you can do pretty much damn near anything, and we'll see a lot of different examples within there. Okay, but that's going to be the starting point for what my events happen to be for when I want to initiate a change on something. Okay, so let's pick on whatever it's going to be. Okay, you know, client accepted is always a good place to start. So that initial, you know, TCP handshake going on there. I've got my connection. I have this stuff set up. Now, what do I do? Wow, the anticipation, you know, it's kind of the hard part. There's so many options for things. Well, let me go ahead and clear this off, because really my idea is that I'm going to be doing kind of just that. I have, you know, my variables. I know when I'm going to do it. So when, so I'll put here, when equals client accepted. Okay, so my TCP exchange, perfectly cool. Now, what's the next thing I have to come up for? All right, so this was my when. That's right, this is the if. Okay, so now I have to have some idea as far as my, you know, really what I want to do, how I want to go about doing this. And a lot of it's going to depend on what specifically I'm measuring, because I can measure lots of things. So if, when we do an if, we have, well, logical operators. Okay, so operators, so I'll put the quotes around the if here. So different operators that I have, I can use contains, I can use matches, equals, starts with, and likewise, we can do ends with. Let's see, what else can I do? Oh, I can do regex. So matches, regex. Okay, so regular expressions that I use in there, and I can also use stuff with logical operators of not, and, or. Okay. So that gives me a lot of combinations that I can do, where I can say, you know, contains the word text and ends with .html, whatever things that I'm kind of getting into. Again, looking at what it is that I'm matching that I want to do stuff with. So everything that we do, everything that we think about with this stuff. What are some other options? Things that I can, we look at what we're actually going to be querying, okay? And there's a whole lot of different variables or different things that we can query. As an example, I can get into things like querying, and it'll always have a major portion in capitals, and then a double colon, and then something else underneath that we're getting. So like IP remote ADDR, so remote address. So basically the IP address of the client over here, of number 1. I can do IP : TOS. So the type of service. This would be for QoS related things, my DSCP value that I'm getting out of it. I can do TCP. So information on here. So I suppose remote port would probably be a good one to use. That's going to be the, who it's trying to get to, so like port 80 or port 443 or something like that in there. So all sorts of different things. And I can do, TCP payload, I can do payload length, I can do offset, I can do MSS. We can do all sorts of different information in here. I can actually match data by doing TCP payload and then having information in there as far as what it's matching. We can even get into, and probably not at client accepted, but if I'm matching something further on, I could also match stuff like load balance status. Based on which pool member that I picked over here. On that load balancing, I could put additional things into it. So, I got lots and lots of control over what it is I'm doing. And believe me, there are pages and pages and pages of documentation on these different things. Just want to give you the overview of it. I want you to get familiar with it so you can kind of read through and get that idea. So if some information, whatever it is right here, like IP remote address, contains, matches, equals, starts with, ends with, matches, regex. So if something, condition, value, then I go to my action. Okay, so you're setting up the rule for what it's going to be in there. So all sorts of different things that we have. Okay, so let me go into and clear this off here again so we can go into my actions. All right, so now we're on number 3. And those actions, again, are my then portion. Okay? So these are known as statements. Different types of things that I can do in here. Okay? So I can do certainly some terminating ones. Like I could tell it drop. Very common type things to do. I'll tell it pool or pool underscore member. So I'll just write that separately. So give it to a specific server. I can log. I can do SNAT. So really all sorts of different things that we have here as far as what we can do. We can also nest if-then statements. Okay? So I can have multiple, a hierarchy of if-thens. It's kind of like an if-then-else type idea, but multiple things going on there. I can do this up to 100 deep. Now, that would be a pretty damn complicated rule. So, certainly when you're starting out, my advice, don't set your goal on doing that. Just one of those things, because you can definitely confuse yourself with it. But things that we have going on in here, I can also do stuff that modifies or changes packets as we go. Okay? So I can do things at link layer, I can do things at the IP header, at the TCP header, HTTP header, I can do cookies, I can do SSL logic or layers and stuff in there, I can change my IPTOS, I can insert remove headers, I can do HTTP redirects, I can do all sorts of different things for my actions as far as what it is that I want. Okay? So bottom line is you have manual control over pretty much anything that goes on through your ADC in there. So different points that we have based on the events. So kind of think about what it is that you want, what it is that you'd like to do, what it is that I guess, think you want to do, and kind of choose in that fashion for stuff. So a couple other notes as you create your iRules. Now, first of all, those are created in the local traffic iRules. So very catchy place where they happen to put them in there. They're then associated to a virtual server for wherever it is that you want them to actually occur. So it's all going to be based on a trigger of where the packet initially arrives at the ADC from there. Now, other things that you can do, I can use the pound command to put comments into my iRules. I would highly suggest doing that, especially because after a while, you may be really proud of yourself. You worked a whole weekend on getting something done. 6 months later, when you go to change it, what are the chances you're going to really remember everything you were thinking about? Or you're going to have to spend time and relearn it, rethink it, spend some time scratching your head going, what was I thinking? Believe me, I've been there, done that. So if you ever get a chance to comment things, whether it's a router config, switch config, here my iRules, absolutely do that. It's nice not just for yourself down the road, but if you're working with a team of people, it's a much better way of doing that as well, to explain any of the logic or any of the choices or anything like that that goes on. But those are my concepts for what iRules are. Within my iRules sections, we've really gone over the structure of what they happen to be, where to put them, and what we can be looking at. But remember, the bottom line is we have a when, which is my event. I have an if, which is my condition, and operators or multiple conditions and things like that. And then I have a then portion, which is my action. So once we get that structure down, it's just a matter of looking up and using our imagination for things on at what point do we want to change something, what it is we want to match, and what it is that we actually want to do to manually do stuff in here to create our policy-based forwarding. And that's what an iRule is. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.